Sushma, Vineet, Elham, Sajib.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the day 5 of UGC sponsored 1 week online short term course on gender sensitization. This is second session of the day, and we have Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt as our eminent speaker for the talk. I cordially welcome you, sir. Dr. Javed Iqbal Bhatt is an academic, writer, translator, and a cultural critic. He teaches at the Postgraduate Department of English, South Campus, University of Kashmir. He has completed his PhD from the Department of English, Ohio University, USA. He has done his MPhil and MA program from the Center for English Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is the author of 7 books, including Rupture, from Oxford University Press. Javed Iqbal Bhatt teaches literary theory and criticism, British fiction, Indian English writing across genres, and modern British poetry. We are very fortunate to have an interaction with you, sir. The platform is all yours. You can start whenever you feel like, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anshul, for the introduction. Let me try to share the PPT. Just a second. Is it visible there?
Sir, not yet.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you, Department of Economics and HRDC Center, Kurukshetra University, and Dr. Hemlata Sharma ma'am for inviting me to deliver this talk uh, during the course of this, online workshop or the online course. I forgot the name, that title that you have given to it. So I'm grateful to all of you to share my views and ideas regarding gender, and I hope you will listen to it carefully, and then we may have a brief discussion also about the same. So to begin with, my topic is gendering education, revisiting the curriculum. So first of all, a little bit about the title itself, why I chose this title. So if you can look at the first two words, gender, I have hyphenated. I have put gendering, gender hyphen ing, and education. So there is a the first part before the colon. There is a bidirectional meaning of this title. So it is both the need to genderize education, and the second is how education also can genderize maybe society. So you have two kinds of meanings that I wanted to play, a kind of play on these two words, but underscoring a deeper concern that I have with both education as well as gender. And the second part is revisiting the curriculum. We'll talk about that. So that was a little bit about the title, that why I chose this. So you have a bi-directional meaning in the very title of this talk. And then the broad structure of my presentation. First of all, we will go for an introduction, and then there will be terms of reference, what kind of terminology will be used during this presentation. Then we have existing curriculum at all levels, from school, higher secondary, college, university, PhD, at all levels. We will have an overview of what is happening currently in our educational system. Then NEP 2020 will see what it has to say about gender. Then level determination for gender sensitization as to where this idea of gender has to be inculcated, introduced during the education process. Then we have contemporary debates around gender question. We'll talk about that. Then future legal questions. The Supreme Court Handbook, an important document that was released recently by the highest judicial institution of the country, Supreme Court of India. We'll have a look at that. And then finally, I will summarize what I mean to say during this presentation, some key points, and what is uh, the future direction in terms of gender and in terms of education. So if we first of all go to introduction, why gender and education? You see, this is very important. Uh, if you have read news only yesterday, the Supreme Court of India, it issued a kind of a reprimand to judges of the Calcutta High Court. I was wondering if it is called Calcutta High Court or Kolkata High Court, and then I checked. It is still, I guess, the Calcutta High Court. That is why I'm using that word. So what had happened that some judges of Calcutta High Court had issued an order in which they had slammed two young people and used the kind of language that is that is not in vogue when you think in terms of gender, or not acceptable. So asking them to do certain things, you mend your behavior, your sexual behavior, or I think they were told that you need to you need to fit in basically to the existing norms. Now the Supreme Court of India took notice of it, and it it called these words as unwarranted and unacceptable. So aspects of that judgment which Calcutta High Court had issued, the Supreme Court of India took a serious note of it. So why I am mentioning this? I am mentioning this because if a High Court judge does not have an understanding of the kind of language that is acceptable as per the existing standard norms, then what do you expect of the population at the lower level? These are judges, you know, important figures in our society. So that is indicative. That is indicative of the kind of ignorance and ill information with regard to the question of gender. Then gender also is important in the sense that access, content, teaching and learning context and practices. There are not currently the kind of opportunities available across all genders. I will give you an example from my own department. I have been teaching the department since 2017. So fairly long time. I got appointed immediately after my masters. So I have noticed many students who come to the department, but until the completion of the degree, and even after that, they are not, they don't feel free, or they are not in a position to articulate the kind of orientation that they have. With the result, their presence in class is merely a very artificial performance, because they are constantly informed and directed, not both consciously as well as unconsciously, to fit into a uh, particular norm that is prevalent inside the classroom. There is one student whom I remember, who came to me long after he had completed his degree, and once he told me, then he kind of opened up, as we use in the case of in gender lingo. He came out, and but to me only. Maybe because he knew that teacher has an experience of the outside world, he won't take it otherwise. He knows about the context of the situation, about his particular orientation. So he began to vent in my presence. But there are similar situations. This is just one classroom that I am talking about. Then what do you expect of classrooms in college or schools or higher secondaries, where students may have a different orientation but constantly feel the compulsion and the pressure to meet the expectations of the predominant majority in that classroom. So this topic is also important because there has to be a broad based educational opportunity for everyone. And then we also talk about the skill gap and the pay gap, that we have boys and girls. In fact, even mentioning boys and girls when you talk about gender is a little debatable. So you have girls that their skill gap remains, the gap between them and the boys. With the result later on in life, it converts into the pay gap also. So if you expect or if you encourage girls to get into arts and humanities, and then the boys into science and mathematics, the hard sciences, then in the future you find that the 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 higher end jobs, higher end pay jobs, they are in the sciences and the maths. So they get, so this begins at an early stage at the school level itself, that girls they fit more into arts and humanities. In fact, uh, if I look at my own educational teaching career, I find arts humanities departments generally predominated by the girls. We'll talk a little bit more about that, because that issue is slightly, one has to dig into it as to why that is so. But it is not only the girls. Recently, UNICEF came out with a report where it also highlighted the boys' disengagement from education. That the retention process, the retention of boys is difficult in the sense that they drop out more in comparison to boys at certain stages of this process. So basically, what we require, especially in the context of India, is a system-wide transformation where we have to take the whole ecosystem into account and then think about the changes that need to be made and where they need to be made. Because education is the pathway to gender equality. It is the impressions that you create among children at school level, higher secondary level, which are more impressionable years, that leave a lasting effect upon them, what they do in future, how they craft their own lives in future. For that, this education is the main gateway, the pathway. That is why we are emphasizing here education, educational curriculum, what needs to be done in that context, so that we can have equal, not only equal opportunities for all. And when we say all, we mention not only boys and girls but also maybe transgender, and then there are other genders also, we'll talk about them. So then if we look at some terms, important terms in this debate, in this discussion. So first of all comes gender. Now there is a confusion among many as to what gender is. So they confuse gender with sex, and these are independent concepts, but no doubt they are interdependent, but they are independent concepts. Gender is very fluid. So for example, sex may mean because of physiological characteristics, or uh, how uh, how a particular baby looks at the time of birth, how an infant looks at the time of birth, bodily features. And that may be important in the medical and the legal context. So medically, legally speaking, those things are important. But once you move from that into gender, it becomes more interesting and maybe more controversial as well. Because in gender comes the importance of family history, social condition, psychoanalysis, cultural, expectations. That part comes under the. So in a way, you can say gender is more of a social construction. It is a construction made by society. Although you may be familiar with it, but I'm just kind of trying to, repeat for emphasis. And gender is, there is a very famous book by Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, where she talks about that, one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. So woman is more of a social category. It is more of a category that is crafted. It is more of a performance category. So, and in gender, we have normally people think about Judith Butler, and who wrote the book The Gender Trouble, and also Bodies That Matter. We generally presume that that is the starting point of the gender question, but that is not true, because if you look behind, there were already discussions that had started with regard to gender. For example, Simone de Beauvoir, her book The Second Sex, or even Juliet Mitchell, who wrote Feminism and Psychoanalysis, or her famous uh, article, The Feminine Long Revolution, Female Longest Revolution, something of that sort. You can easily Google it. Then we have even Gail Rubin. Gail Rubin, again, her important articles in this context, for example, Thinking Sex or The Traffic in Women, became landmark essays where they discussed the issue of gender. So gender is a very fluid concept, and there are any number of theories about gender, and most of these theories have some assumptions behind it. They assume certain things about uh, the you know the infants or babies. Then we have male and female. So male female are basically based on the physiological characteristics of the infant, of the baby. And man and woman, they are mostly the social construction category. As I said, Simone de Beauvoir, who said that a woman is not born, one becomes a woman. So becoming a woman because of family compulsions, societal compulsions. And it is the same in case of man as well. Because one needs to be very careful when we talk about opportunities. We talk about opportunities for both men, women, and other uh, people of different sexual orientations. Because a lot of things are happening, and towards which attention is now being directed, wherein there is a there is a particular skewed attention towards the concerns and the problems of women, and at the same time the problems and concerns of men maybe are not given the attention that they deserve. We can talk about that also whenever you can note down any question that you may have about that, because whenever we discuss these things, many things come out. And I hope you are also free, when we talk about these things, you listen to all of it, and whatever thing comes to your mind, because the point is we express these things, at least in this space where we are apparently free to talk about. Then when I say education, education by education mean not only the formal but also the homeschooling also. So education from the kindergarten to school to high school to higher secondary to college to university, and then into research and homeschooling as well. So all of that comes in. Then equity and equality. Many people confuse these two terms. So equity is based on the you want an outcome. For example, if in a society there are 3% of uh, transgender people, you want a 3% reservation in different sectors of economy. But equality is equal opportunity, where you provide the equal opportunity to different groups. So these two should not be lumped together. They should not be blended together. They are two different concepts. Normally, equity is associated with you know groups. For example, if you have heard about the woke culture in the US these days, lot of discussions about that, lot of controversies also. So these are equity belongs to the group where you want an equal outcome. It is outcome first. Outcome is in mind. So if you have a particular group 10%, you want a 10% reservation uh, in a particular sector of economy or in different sectors of economy. So equality is you provide a level playing field to everyone, irrespective of any distinction, biological or social. You provide a level playing field, an even field for anyone to compete. So feminism is, in simple language, advocacy for the rights of women. Although in feminism also you have different kinds of feminism: socialist feminism, radical feminism. Then you have more traditional kind of feminism, and then different. There are these four waves of feminism. One beginning from late 19th century to early 20th century, then 60s to 80s, and then from 90s onwards, and then the contemporary. And different phases had. There is a long discussion. We don't need to go into that, but just to introduce you to this term. So you have LGBTQ, and the letters are adding constantly. There is a new addition of letters. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, and there is different kind of activities around that. Pride month is celebrated in the US. So different. That is why I said gender is very fluid, because gender is seen as a spectrum. It is not seen as a dyad. So it is not man and woman. So it is now seen as a spectrum. These orientations, they mingle and commingle, different kinds of permutations and combinations. Whether we should go that far or not, that is something for all of us to think about, keeping in view our own societal, you know, deep rooted norms, faith traditions, a different perspective about cosmos, about life, whether we should go that far, because a lot is happening in the developed world about these terms, these letters also. So patriarchy is basically privileging of the male in the sexual economy. Misogyny is this hate of the women. Mansplaining sexism is discrimination based on sex, particularly towards women. Then you have mansplaining, a term often used wherein you are kind of you know offering unwanted help. So you are going ahead to offer help where perhaps it is not required by a woman or a girl. Mansplain, you are trying to explain. Mansplain. Now the important issue here in case of gender is social construction versus engineering. Social construction engineering versus biological construction. This is a very important debate here, and still it is inconclusive, and people are discussing this. Whether a particular action is done by a male or a female, is it motivated by the innate biological nature, or is it motivated by the social compulsions? So, is it socially generated, socially conditioned, or biologically conditioned? So, where from does, for example, If we find more girls are into humanities and arts, is it because they are innately driven towards it, biological construction, or is it because reality for them is being changed? Maybe they are being constructed by society to believe that this field is important for you. So that remains. There is research to show evidence for both. We'll talk more about that also. Now, existing curriculum, when you link gender with education, we have to think about the existing curriculum. So when we think about existing curriculum, we have a traditional mode. Now, when I was in school, we had in social science, because most of it falls in social science. We had civics, history, geography, economics, and these four books were tied together. So, in fact, there's a running joke. There used to be a joke in Kashmir that once a teacher asked a student, "What do you mean by geography?" And the student replied, "That which is bound with history book." So, the binding was one for all these three, four books. So, and in this traditional mode, what did we do? History, ancient, medieval, modern. Then geography, Indian geography, world geography, minerals here and there. So, or you had in civics, basic civic, what rules to follow, how to do those things. And economics, you will learn about economics. So, gender was nowhere, or gender is nowhere, even if you look at it today. You don't find such an important subject is nowhere. Although it is you know, it is something that is so fundamental, but we don't find a mention of it in the earlier social science textbooks or in the current textbook. I don't know because I'm not so intimate with the current textbooks, but I'm also working these days with the UGC, this NCRT, textbook committee that has informed to reframe the textbooks, and I am part of the social science curricular area group. So we do have chance to talk about these things. So as it is, I don't think there is any mention of gender in the existing textbooks also. And so and it is a cross-cutting theme. It cuts across all, all disciplines, all fields, but it is absent there. Recently, women's studies departments have been started. So our own University of Kashmir has one women's studies department. I think recently started 2, 3 years or 4 years back. I am not sure the exact year, but it has been started at the higher level. Same is the case in the college level, where you had a traditional subjects. Now there is some change in subjects, but I don't think gender and women's studies. I think women's studies is a little debatable title. It can be different, but the thing is, uh, it is not available as a concern corresponding to its concern in our societies, in our lives. We don't find it in that measure in our departments. With the result, the attitudes of school-going adolescents or in even the general population, they are quite, you know, you can say quote unquote backward with regard to the issues of gender, not acquainted with the contemporary global debates about gender. A study was conducted in 2020 in West Bengal, where the attitude of school-going adolescents was taken with regard to gender equity, and the response was quite dismal. What both girls and boys said about gender issues. So they had the same opinions, uh, like that of the Calcutta High Court judges that I mentioned early in the presentation. So why is it so? Because there is no prior information, dissemination of information, and acquainting, familiarizing students with what is gender. So we are carrying on the earlier uh, antiquated ideas with regard to gender. That is why. Now, what was the conclusion of that study? Given the findings, they wanted intensification of awareness with regard to gender and raising health awareness among women. Now, this is significant also in the context of the UNICEF report, where access to health, uh, being healthy, uh, was raised and underlined that women have to be given access to healthy mode of life from beginning to the end, particularly hygiene. You know, even today, if you look at the higher institutions of higher learning, universities, even ask male professors with regard to hygiene, any special needs of women. Maybe they show either lack of interest or ignorance, or simply we don't know what are you talking about. So these things are against. For example, I will tell you, when I was doing my PhD in the US Ohio University, I was a teaching assistant. Also, I was teaching the freshman students. Freshmen are students who are fresh from high school. That is their first year in college. There is a 4-year college period. Freshman, then you have sophomore, then you have junior and senior. These are freshman students, and their level of awareness was quite high. For example, uh, one teacher had mentioned the word shame, shameless. About that word, a hue and cry was raised. Why was this word used against a female student? So compare that to the report of the study, where there is a glaring lack of knowledge about the gender issues. Because the problem is, when you condition any person to a particular view of life, he or she begins to believe in that. Reality changes. That is why Judith Butler calls gender as a performance also. Performance theory is one important sub theory of gender also. Then everything becomes a performance. You are enacting a role that is assigned to you. So these students who have been uh, who are in school in West Bengal, they have been enacted to perform a particular role. So they tell what has been you know fed into them by different social, political, economic setup in institutions. So they have stereotypes in mind, and they are regurgitating those stereotypes. So stereotype again is a set ideal, often wrong, but continues to perpetuate in society. So we have recently there was a Pew Research Center study conducted it from November 2019 to 2020, March 2020. If you look at the findings, so you find there's a minimal gap between men and women in India on gender attitudes. So gender attitude does not seem to vary. For example, if you look at the first, men in a family should be primarily responsible for making decisions about expenses. Men 21% yes, women 19%. Men generally make better political leaders than women. So you have men saying 29 yes and women saying 21 yes. Sons should have greater rights to inheritance from parents. 34 men yes, 33 women yes. So this is the common refrain in India of the son preference. This phenomenon is very much prominent across India, cutting across religious, I guess, if I can make that categorical statement, cutting across religious barriers. That the importance, the sense of entitlement, then later on sons have in different fields of life. That also reminds me of an episode when I was teaching. in Ohio University as a teaching assistant. One day I asked students about dowry. So most of the students were blank. They had no idea about this word, about this phenomenon. So they kept asking me, what does it mean? What are you talking about? And then I kind of stopped discussing it because I thought then the discussion will go into different directions and the negative projection portrayal of society of as well. So in India particularly, so we have this sun preference, and it is sun preference is both from men as well as women. Maybe not across the board, every nook and cranny of India, but I am saying the observation as well as the study here from Pew Research Center. Then son should have the primary responsibility to take care of the for parents as they age. 47 men, yes. 42 women also, yes. Son should have the primary response for a parent's last rites or burial rituals. So last rites and burial has been added because of Christians, Jews, as well as Muslims who bury their dead. So son should have the more responsibility. Again, the same son priority, son reference. A wife, and the interesting part is, a wife must always obey her husband. So there you have very high percentage across the board. So where from the question is, where from do these things come? They come from a particular conditioning. In fact, there was one question: if you want to improve the safety of women, it is more important to teach boys to respect women, ask girls to behave appropriately. So in this case, both again the same kind of response. So on the one hand, yes, boys should be taught to respect women. The girls responded positively. But when they were asked whether girls have to behave properly, again the response was yes. The point that I'm trying to underscore here with the help of these studies or research center reports is that there is a uh, huge vacuum in case of the dissemination of the idea of gender. That is why education has to play a key role, because education is that gateway that can unfold different possibilities, that can maybe change the perspective of both boys as well as girls as well as transgender with regard to their own self, with regard to their society. The expectations may be also changed because once you once you encourage them to enact a very scientific and a rational role, naturally the reality around also is changed. The perception and the perspective, they undergo changes. So you can have more, you know, responsible behaviors as human beings. For example, we often say compassion is associated with women, but men can also be compassionate. It all depends on how you are. Now, there is a good, nice YouTube video where uh, a particular LGBT activist, she is talking about males and females. She had children and how she encouraged her male child to dress like a girl. While I'm talking about all these things, we are all thinking and reflecting about these issues. It is not a judgmental presentation. You are open to disagree completely with what I am saying. We are just keeping our mind open about it. So she looks like a man, but she is basically a woman. Her voice is like that of a woman, but looks apparently when the YouTube video opened, there was no voice. I thought a man is going to talk, and she had then children, and one male child she asked to dress. It was in school that the teacher asked the peers asked him to dress properly, and then she began to dress as a man. The point that she was trying to say that reality, these things can be transformed with good cooperation, with a very compassionate attitude in society as well. That is why school has to, the curriculum has to play a role. What do you teach in classrooms? Because that is the classroom is the initial point of contact, the medial point of contact in society and the individual from, at an early stage of life. And especially in our society where teacher has still slightly greater degree of command, a slightly greater degree of respect compared to many other professions. So what a teacher says or does is often taken very seriously at the lower levels. So this is Pew Research Center. Then we have NEP 2020. Now, since I told you I'm working with this syllabus change group, and what NEP 2020 also emphasizes that socio-economically disadvantaged and advantaged groups, an emphasis upon them. Now, in this come not only people who are economically, but also disadvantaged because of social reason. Now, there comes your gender part in it. Transgender people. In fact, this word is used in NEP 2020. Then we create aspirational districts, special education zones, and very importantly, gender inclusion fund. The government of India will create a gender inclusion fund, and then this will be disbursed to states for special needs of the girl child as well as the transgender. So that has been envisaged in the NEP 2020. The point is to enhance gender balance in admissions. That has to be enhanced. So NEP 2020 is a vision document. Then afterwards, a national curriculum framework was created, and then the syllabus has to be designed, the content of it, and finally the textbooks. Now there is a chance here to insert this vision of NEP 2020 in the textbooks, because here is a kind of a manifesto in front of us, and here is an opportunity. That is why I am part of a subgroup of cross-cutting themes, and we have stressed and wanted that gender awareness should start from maybe ninth class because of the biological trajectory, maybe a little bit earlier. But ninth, we can have definitions, causes, consequences, so that there is an early awareness inside the classroom, both in student as well as teacher, that there is something called a gender and there is something called a gender discrimination, and that has to be removed. So for this, we have to take use of this NEP 2020 so that syllabus can be changed. Now, now what does it reflect? NEP 2020. It reflects a global awareness about gender issues. There is a rising awareness. In fact, if you see many students who directly go from the backwaters of India to the developed world, Europe or the US, they come from far-flung colleges and they qualify certain exams. They get some scholarships. They go to the US, Australia, or Europe. I have seen many students facing problems because of the lack of knowledge about gender. Because gender then involves rules and regulations, how to behave, how to look at people, how to address people. So because they don't have prior training in the case of gender, they have several issues with law enforcement agencies. So that becomes a very important. And what it does also later on, it brings a bad name to the society, the country from which you come from. That why do they face these issues? Because their educational curriculum was not designed in such a way their teachers did not train them in such a way that they could be aware about the problem of being lax in case of addressing and you know understanding what gender is. These are very, what kind of words do you use? These are very important because, as I said, India is rapidly growing and people are moving out. They are moving towards US is an aspiration, Europe is an aspiration, Australia is an aspiration. No doubt, we may say that we have now internationalization of education, campuses for international students, but then still, the fact is people are moving out and expanding aspiration. But there, once they land there, how to talk to men, how to talk to women, you know, uh, what are the legal issues that one can land in if we don't respect the certain lines and certain boundaries. I have seen many students facing problems because of that. In fact, even teachers who join departments from third world countries and then join first world countries. And interestingly, students from Saudi Arabia, they had lesser problems because the laws there are very extremely tight, especially in case of the the gender dimension. Anyway, so that was. Then we have, what do you do with regard to education curriculum also? The pedagogy also has to be matched. One teacher being careful with language. So, giving a small example, instead of saying boys and girls, you can simply say students. Because when you create a dyad of boys and girls, you are quickly excluding the transgender or any other orientation that there may be in the class. Or for example, you are queuing up. Boys line up, girls line up. You can create a students line up. Although it may be radical to some, but that is the way if you want to be on the right side of history. Or maybe case studies to be done. What is the sex ratio in your area? What is the male female sex ratio? And what is the reason if it is low? What is the infanticide rate and why it is so high, maybe among the girls, the females? Or taking care of the special needs of female students with regard to hygiene, menstruation. Are students aware of that? Are teachers aware about that? Maybe leaves, special absences from classrooms for female students. Or avoiding again language. Boys don't cry. Girls have to be caring. There is a maternal instinct inside the female. So transgender students, first of all, making understand and not stereotyping that you are gay and gay is everything. There are so many other categories there. Then recently, Supreme Court of India issued a handbook in which it listed so many words that ought to be avoided in orders, judgments, pleadings, or other drafts, and using alternative or preferred words phrase. So this can be used as a pedagogical resource. I think it is a worthy document that we should all go through. I think in August, 16th of August 2023, it is called Combating Gender Stereotypes. For example, the word eve teasing. Don't use the word eve teasing. Simply say street sexual harassment. Because when you say eve teasing, it is a very euphemistic kind of an expression where you are trying to cover up what it actually means. If you look at it from the perspective of the victim and not from the perspective of the perpetrator, then you understand, what it means. So important indicative of where the society is progressively heading, being careful with the kind of language that people use. So For example, the word affair, replace it with relationship, because affair has a very negative connotation. Similarly, the word keep or concubine, you replace it with some other words. So gradually these things are coming from top also Supreme Court, but we have to start from bottom as well, from the curriculum, what a teacher has to say in class, being careful with words and expressions. Just like with regard to the specially able, differently, we say differently able, specially able, not handicapped. Although about that also there is a kind of an interesting side discussion whether handicapped is more appropriate because it evokes certain things, but the change has been made. Especially, or don't say walk-in interview, because when you say walk-in, what about those who cannot walk? So similarly, in case of gender as well, you have to be, girls can't do this, boys can do this. That is something very important. And I will now, since time is, I am heading towards 12:30. I will not take much of your time, although there are a few more slides. We can,
No, you can please continue, Dr. What means
okay,
we can say, because there is lunch afterwards, so we can
okay.
uh,
So
have this.
there are contemporary debates also about this issue of gender. In the US, particularly, because I am following those debates, there is a little bit of disquiet about the extreme forms of this gender theory, especially when it intersects with critical race theory or it intersects with wokeism. There is a little bit of disquiet, especially from the right extreme, the right wing groups. Part of it is legit, but quite a bit of it is, you know, simply not willing to accept what is happening. For example, uh, transgender people, they argue why are they running with females, and then they show images also. Look at this transgender woman who is very muscular, healthy, looking like a male, and she wins the first prize. So exclude that. And about level and content, at which level do you want to introduce the concept of gender? So if a school teacher is talking to a kindergarten student talking about sexual orientation, about that is outrage. And what should be the content? To what extent do you go in expressing these words about gender? So about level, at which level should we introduce it? What should be the content? So about that debate going on. Then of course it is a spectrum. The pronoun debate is very recent. If you have heard about Jordan Peterson, a very famous contemporary thinker, a psychoanalyst, his book recently became very famous, 12 Rules for Life. But then he has some very deep, you know, lectures, profound lectures about psychoanalysis, gender. He talks about them. In Canada, a law had been, I think, passed where pronouns were enforced, that you use a particular pronoun with a transgender person, with a lesbian, with a gay. And Jordan Peterson, he got up against that, say that we should not enforce pronouns. Don't don't enforce a particular kind of language upon people. You see, these days, over the past few years, if you have seen emails, people write he, she, they, ze. This this comes from the pronoun debate. Which pronoun to use about which person? Although we are not in India at that level of debate and discussion, we are still talking about basic gender understanding, gender concept in India. But if you look at the developed countries, I guess there it is going too far. Here we are trying to clutch onto it. They are trying branching into several directions where some people say it is now too much. Let us not go too far. How far are we going to splinter? society. So in India, we have a fundamental level where we are trying to understand and trying to use the idea of gender and make people aware, students especially, and be sensitize them about the issues of women and girls and transgenders, lesbian, gay, whatever categories there are. So that debate, I think you can watch. That is also on YouTube available. Jordan Peterson is, although Jordan Peterson has, when he talks about, he's more into biological construction than social engineering. He's more into idea of biological determinism. You see, there are different kinds of determinisms. You have the Marxist economic determinism, that economics determines consciousness. Then you have Freudian, that psyche, that determines the consciousness, or maybe sex, sexual urge, those kind of things, they determine your consciousness. Then you have this uh, the biological determinism. Your genes, your chromosomes. You have, if you have XX, then there is XY. The chromosomes, the genes, they determine, and millions of years of conditioning, they actually shape up. In fact, he gives several examples. He says, if you look at these Nordic, these countries, Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, there he says that gender parity has almost been achieved. Almost. Male, female, there is progress on both sides. Equal opportunities. And despite those equal opportunities, we find there are more female nurses, more male engineers. So he asks us, why is that so? Is it not because of the biological construction then? Because there is no obstruction for women to become engineers, men to become nurses. And he gives several other examples. He's also compelling in many respects. One can, see what he is trying to say. Then the pay gap example he talks about. He says pay gap is not simply because of skill gap. It is also because the higher you go, the amount of work you have to do. 24 hours work. These business executives, how, who is expected to do that more? So anyway, those are contemporary debates. You can watch him. You can watch uh, Dennis Prager also. He's from the right. Then you have many other contemporary thinkers who are discussing gender and where gender is heading, where gender is going in the US or in the Europe. So we go now. I think that is my final slide here. So how do we summarize it? I try to summarize it, in my own way here. While gender is fluid and expansive, an understanding of it from the rudimentary to the complex is crucial. Beginning with school, the curriculum can be designed to shape the children for an equitable world where all sexes have access to learning tools and opportunities in the job market. The Constitution of India encourages it with the emphasis on diversity, and the NEP 2020 also encourages an inclusive classroom where no child is left behind. However, an important aspect is how to create a fine balance between the native belief, faith traditions, and evolving concepts of gender. So, I thank you very much for listening. That is what I had to say about this topic, gendering education. So, to return to my first title, it is a bidirectional idea that I wanted to talk about, that how gender can be inculcated, the concepts of it through education, and how education may genderize society, and sometimes take it to an extreme form that also has to be avoided. So once again, thank you all of you for being here and listening to what I had to say. Thank you very much.
एक सेकंड. Now, everyone, please, if you have any questions to ask, if you want to say something, you want to discuss something with Dr. Bhatt, please go ahead. Bhavya, Somveer, Urvashi, Vineet.
So we have mostly females here.
Yes, yesterday also we were discussing that we need to sensitize boys, but we have girls more here.
That is okay.
बात करो भाई, पूछो क्वेश्चंस जिसको पूछना है, बोलो.
Yes, anyone. In fact, I often say in my classroom that the best questions are the stupid questions. Stupid, I mean, stupid in the sense or so-called silly questions. Because we feel that we want to ask them, but don't ask them because what others will think about it. But normally they are the best questions when you simply throw out.
सर, जेंडर इंक्लूजन के बारे में थोड़ा बता दीजिए. स्कॉलरशिप्स को अलग कर दें, अगर स्कॉलरशिप नहीं, स्कॉलरशिप या फेलोशिप जो मिलती हैं लड़कियों के लिए, उसके अलावा और क्या-क्या ऐसी स्कीम्स हैं या ऐसे कौन से जेंडर इंक्लूजन के लिए स्टेप्स हैं जो गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर में या प्राइवेट में इंस्टीट्यूट्स में लिए जाते हैं, एजुकेशन में ही?
No, you see, there are currently, if I look at my own trajectory, I have not come across any specific program or grant or project. But since you are working in you are in university, UGC you can apply to. There are these minor projects, major projects, or you can apply to for a postdoc position with a theme, where you can talk about this aspect of life. So that you can postdoc position, minor projects, major projects, or you can apply to international institutes for special grants. So there are different association of Asian humanities, or if you apply for a postdoc position to the US or Europe, there you can, there you can apply. There is more encouragement for example, you want to study in your own region, in your own state, you apply to the US and you can with emphasis on this theme, there you have chances. And within India, I think still, as I said, those who are willing, who can give, may not give because they are not so sensitized about these issues. They are not so aware. So hence their reluctance to go in that direction. But internationally speaking, you can. So you can apply for different kinds of projects. So that there is scope for them.
ओके, थैंक यू सर.
Okay. Yes, anyone, anything else? And one thing one has to, see is that these different sexual orientations are real. They are not just made up. Many people have not. This may be a tiny minority. It's also kind of a sexual minority, but they are there. I I was in this classroom doing PhD, and there were students who had, and they were very brilliant as well at the same time. They were brilliant at the same time. One of my good friends he was from the gay community, but a leading member in that classroom, a leading member in that classroom. Very brilliant. So the thing is that it's a fact. It is not something that is just a second, somebody is. So if there is nothing, can we then? हेलो it's per 5 मिनट per 5 मिनट 5 मिनट per 5 मिनट. Yes, is there anything? And by the way, when you were students, was there anything in the syllabus with regard to gender or gender identities? At at which level did you come into contact with this word in your curriculum? At which point was it school, higher secondary, university for the first time? Can anyone tell me? I mean, when you were in your school or college, higher secondary, university, at which point did you have any course or in syllabus something about gender or gender related issues? I think then, if there is no question, can we then, Hemlata ma'am?
Ma'am, should we bind up?
Yes, anyone else? किसी को कुछ नहीं बोलना है.
Maybe next time when we meet in person.
Yeah, in online, this is really means a very bad thing with online, that they are not in, means offline. We say you are physically present, means mentally absent. In online, they are both physically and mentally absent.
That is okay. It's all right.
Okay. So, okay then, Anshul.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to end with a thank you note to sir. Thank you so much for such an apprehensive and informative lecture and discussion with us, sir. We are grateful to you for taking time to spread a word of wisdom with us. It was very thoughtful of you to not just talk about girls or boys, but including LGBT too. Many knows about LGBT, many are aware about it, but not all are open about it. So thank you so much, sir.
Ah,
You're welcome.
Dr. But just a minute. Everyone switch on your camera. I have to take a screenshot. Okay. Vineet, Elham, Bhavya. Okay, done.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me again.
Thank you very much, sir. It was actually little different and a very good lecture. Means, although I went out for some 10-15 minutes, but even then, means whatever initially I was here and then I was here only. But the thing, what we were focusing on was mostly on gender and all that. But with curriculum, you very well connected it and it was very well received. I don't know how they are not saying anything. They'll discuss it later with me. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.